500 tons of oak and iron cut through the Atlantic swells, carrying 60 cannon across 3 gun decks and enough gunpowder to level an entire city block. Deep in its hold lay more gold than most kingdoms would accumulate over a full decade, while its hull pressed low against the waterline under the immense weight of its cargo as it ran before the trade winds between Spain and the Americas. Every pirate alive dreamed of capturing one. Almost none ever succeeded. This is the story of the galleon, the floating fortress that shaped an era, strained rival empires, and made the most feared men on the ocean look hopelessly outmatched. To truly grasp the galleon's significance, you must first imagine the world before it was conceived. In the early 15th century, European maritime powers were making the uncertain transition from cautious coastal traders into sprawling transoceanic empires. The ships they operated served well enough in the Mediterranean and the North Sea, on the slow, familiar coastal routes that had kept European trade functioning for 1,000 years, but they were wholly unsuited to what the age of exploration was demanding. Portugal was pushing south along the African coastline. Spain was driving west across the vast, open Atlantic. Both nations urgently needed vessels capable of surviving months at sea without resupply, carrying enough cargo to justify the enormous financial cost of each voyage, and defending themselves in waters where there was no friendly harbor, no allied navy, and no possibility of rescue if misfortune struck. Columbus completed his famous 1492 crossing aboard the Caravel, an outstanding exploration vessel, nimble and capable of sailing far closer to the wind than most of its contemporaries. But it was small, carrying perhaps 50 tons of cargo at best. When Spanish silver began flowing from the Americas in the 1530s, something far more powerful was required. The galleon evolved out of the carrack, the large, high-sided merchant ship that had served as the foundation of early 16th century European ocean trade. The carrack was spacious, but cumbersome, and dangerously unstable. Spanish shipbuilders preserved the overall scale, dramatically lowered the forecastle at the bow, lengthened the hull relative to its beam, and fitted gun decks running the full length of the ship. The result was unprecedented, a vessel capable of functioning simultaneously as warship and cargo carrier, fully equipped to defend its contents across thousands of miles of open water, season after season. The word galleon itself first appears in Spanish records during the early 16th century, derived from the oared galley that had long dominated Mediterranean naval warfare. But where the galley was confined to calm coastal waters, the galleon was a creature of the deep Atlantic, built to exploit the trade winds and sustain a commerce that would reshape the entire world for nearly 2 centuries. The construction of a Spanish galleon merits careful study, because the ship was a considerably more sophisticated machine than its iconic outline suggests. The hull was built primarily from oak, ideally the dense, slow-growing variety harvested from the forests of northern Spain, though American timber increasingly supplemented these sources as demand for new galleons outpaced what Spanish forests could reliably provide. The keel, the structural spine running from bow to stern, was fashioned from a single enormous timber, or several pieces joined so tightly they functioned as one continuous structure. The curved transverse ribs giving the hull its shape were individually heated, bent to their required form, and each one fitted precisely to its position along the keel. Over this skeleton, thick planks were laid and sealed with oakum, fibers beaten from old rope and driven into the seams with a caulking iron, then coated with tar to prevent water ingress. Below the waterline, the hull was first sheathed in lead and later in copper sheets, both to slow barnacle accumulation and to guard against the shipworm that could hollow an unprotected tropical hull into useless wreckage within a single year. The masts were enormous. A galleon of 400 tons might carry a main mast 60 feet tall and nearly 3 feet in diameter, supported by a complex web of hemp-standing rigging representing several miles of cordage in total. Managing this system required constant attention. A galleon under sail was not a passive vessel, but a continuous and demanding mechanical performance. The sail plan included square sails on the main and foremasts for running efficiently downwind, supplemented by a lateen sail on the mizzenmast to allow greater directional versatility. A large galleon might carry 15 or more individual sails, and knowing which combination suited the prevailing conditions was knowledge built only through years of hard-won experience at sea. The gun deck constituted one of the most formidable weapon systems of the entire pre-industrial era. A large late 16th century Spanish galleon mounted 60 to 70 guns across 3 decks. The heaviest pieces, culverins capable of hurling a 12-pound iron ball 500 yards with reasonable accuracy, occupied the lowest deck near the waterline. Lighter artillery filled the middle and upper decks. Each bronze cannon was individually cast and marked with foundry crests, then mounted on a wheeled wooden carriage enabling it to be run out through the gun port, fired, and hauled back in for reloading. Even a highly trained crew required 2 to 3 minutes between shots, a constraint that shaped the tactical thinking of every naval commander of the period. A single iron ball striking a wooden hull did not merely penetrate, it shattered, planking into lethal splinters, capable of killing and maiming men across the full width of a gun deck in an instant. The treasure fleet system, the galleon, existed to protect ranks among the most remarkable logistical operations in recorded history. Twice each year, a convoy assembled at Seville, later at Cadiz, and departed for the Americas. One fleet sailed for Veracruz in Mexico, the other made for Panama, the gateway to the silver mines of Peru. Both convoys wintered in their respective ports, exchanging Spanish-manufactured goods for American silver and other commodities, then reunited at Havana each spring for the homeward passage, sailing together under the protection of purpose-built escort warships. The volumes of silver moving through this system were almost incomprehensible. The mine at Potosi in present-day Bolivia, discovered in 1545, alone supplied roughly a third of the world's entire monetary silver supply for the following 2 centuries. A galleon lost at sea was therefore far more than a sunken ship. It represented a rupture in the global financial system, capable of unsettling banking houses from Genoa to Amsterdam and disrupting the payment of Spanish armies across half of Europe. The pirates who dreamed of taking a galleon were imagining something far closer to robbing a sovereign treasury than seizing an ordinary merchant vessel. A single well-loaded galleon could carry 500,000 pesos in silver, the equivalent of a full year's revenue for a medium-sized European state. The defenses surrounding these ships were layered and extremely difficult to overcome. The convoy system alone made individual interception nearly impossible. A pirate crew approaching 20 or 30 ships, several of them dedicated warships, faced odds no rational assessment could support. Departure dates were guarded as state secrets, routes were varied within the limits set by the trade winds, and the navigators who guided the galleons were among the most skilled and best compensated pilots in the world. Francis Drake came closest to realizing the dream, seizing the Cacafuego off Ecuador in 1579, after spending weeks interrogating smaller vessels to pinpoint her exact movements. He arrived home extraordinarily wealthy, and Queen Elizabeth reportedly received a portion large enough to settle the entire national debt. By the late 17th century, however, the galleon's era was drawing to a close. English and Dutch navies had developed purpose-built ships of the line, vessels designed exclusively for fleet combat and superior to the hybrid galleon in every military respect. Spain responded by separating what the galleon had always combined, assigning specialized warships to battle duties and dedicated cargo vessels to trade. The galleon quietly left active service, leaving behind a mythology that has never entirely faded and a scattered legacy of sunken treasure that continues to surface from the ocean floor, century after century, long after the age that created it has disappeared.